Hello, everyone. Adam here from Three Count Radio, and today I have the man who wears so many hats it's genuinely difficult to name them all in one introduction. But I have the voice of Futureshock Professional Wrestling, Mr. Rob Halden. How you doing, my friend?
Hi, mate. Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, no problem at all. It's an absolute pleasure. What have you been up to?
Surviving the heat wave. It was the Edinburgh Fringe Festival or it still is. In fact, it's finishing like tomorrow. And I have an awful lot of kind of people that I work with that are up there taking their comedy shows up there. And I tend to take a sneaky kind of 2-week holiday in August as well. My busy period ends at the start of August generally. So I was down in Devon with the family having a nice break, and it's kind of back to work now.
Nah. Did you enjoy the holiday though?
Yeah, but like, so what happened? Obviously it's lovely spending time with my little niece and the family and everything, but I found an Italian deli in Devon and it was amazing. It was like some out of Sopranos, cannolis and Italian sandwiches and the sliced meat, and yeah. So that was the highlight.
Sounds delightful.
That and a little shop selling old comic book issues. It's a dream. Yeah, that and the beach.
Yeah. That sounds beautiful. Not much of a beach person myself, but everything else sounds divine.
I like to look at the beach. I like to be on concrete pavement, not horrible sand, and go look at the lovely water in the beach. But yeah, I'm not it's too much. It's too much mess and all that at the end.
Plus, I've got a very big phobia of the open water, so
that'll do it. Yeah,
I said that too.
Yeah.
No, it's not for me, but I'm sure other people absolutely love it. I've
heard of one or two people like the seaside. I hear it's quite popular. It's quite a recent thing. It's going to catch on, and it's going to be big one day. I'm sure it is.
Yeah, not right now, but someday in the future. Someday.
Oh yeah.
We're visionaries. Yeah, I went to Bolton Food Festival yesterday.
Oh wow!
And they had, when I say they had everything, I mean it. I had this hot dog. It was an oak smoked hot dog. It was like that. It was gigantic and absolutely beautiful.
It's my favorite. I live in it's a middle-sized town, but it's still a town, and we don't, I love anytime I'm in a city. The thing I love is just getting really great food, and street food especially. It's fantastic. We have like once a month there's something put on in the park where street food vendors come to the town, or every 2 months, and all the little sheltered people of this town go, "What is this?" It's brilliant to see. It's someone that kind of quite frequently works in cities. It's amazing to see like the small town people around me going, "Oh," and we're going to get drunk in the afternoon from a cart.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was food, drink. It had merchandise, little things for dogs as well, for your pets, and everything. And I'm not sure. Have you ever played the game Portal?
No, I'm not a big gamer. No, I'm aware of it. You use a shoot a gun and it opens a portal, and you kind of use that to do stuff, right?
I got the companion cube, and I'm a very happy boy.
Yeah, I do a podcast. The guy that does the podcast with me is a massive gamer, and an awful lot of our podcast is him making a reference I don't have any context for, and me going, "Good, cool, all right." Does sound like a very good game.
There's nothing better than making references to the other person has no idea what you're on about.
I did not touch my PlayStation 4 once during the lockdown. I didn't go. I did not. I'm not. Again, I am really not a big gamer. I like video games in theory. I tend to buy a new game, and I play it for like 2 days, and then I'm kind of like, I'm not good enough to go any further on the game, and I kind of don't care, and I'm done.
I've been there. I've been there with a few games that I can't necessarily get into. It's just whether it's difficulty or whether it's just the story or the feel of the game. Like, because I kind of like reading a book, I guess, isn't it? The direction and story and everything.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm looking forward to the AW game, though. I'm going to make sure I get a copy of that because that looks really cool.
Yeah, I might do myself. Can't say I watch AEW, but if it's about the game, I'll very, very be happy. English.
Mm.
English.
Yeah, it's helpful sometimes.
It is. It is. It slips stuff from time to time, but it does work. It helps. Yeah.
I'll pay any amount of money to get a game that's to play Sting in. It's something
Oh well, yeah.
Anytime any video game where I can play Sting, that's I'm gonna buy that.
Fair play. Can't argue with you there. Can't argue with you there. And since we're talking about wrestling, the voice of Futureshock Wrestling. What was the journey? What was it that what was the journey that got you into commentary for Futureshock?
Well, I'm a very old man, so I grew up with 80s wrestling, the first boom, Hogan and Randy and Andre and all that, and then I was a teenager in the Attitude Era, Perfect Time, the second boom. So I kind of had all that in me, and I'm not sure I ever considered. I'm not an athlete. If anyone who's met me, they will know I'm not an athlete. But I think maybe Joey Styles was the first time I really, an ECW, really kind of thought about. I was really impressed and thought about the commentator, and it seemed a little bit more like a very well-educated fan doing it. Not a knock on Joey Styles, but way more than like Gorilla Monsoon or Bobby Heenan or Vince or whatever when I was a kid. But I don't think I really thought about it. And then 2012, I got an opportunity to work for Infinite Promotions at Liverpool. It's a comedian friend of mine. There's a massive weird crossover between comedians of my generation and wrestling fans. I don't quite know what it is, but I grew up, and most of my life, huge parts of my life where I was the only person I knew in my friend group that liked wrestling. And then I get into stand up, and suddenly it's like every third or fourth male stand up of my age is a big wrestling fan. And one of them was a guy called Tommy Finch, friend of mine, and I can't quite remember how it all happened. I got a message out the blue one day, and he was kind of working behind the scenes for Infinite, and they were gearing up for their very first big show and needed a commentator. And it was just brought me, and like nobody knew, I'd never been involved behind the scenes in wrestling in any capacity. So nobody knew who I was, and nobody really kind of was that fussed about whether I worked out or not. But my friend Tommy put in a good word, I did 51st State of Emergency. Got to work with Danny Hope and Joey Hayes and Zach Gibson, Babyface Pitbull, and some others for the kind of first time. And yeah, it was very much like, it was very clear that people in power barely knew I was meant to be there, and there was no direction. But it was a mad day. Like the ring didn't come, or got broke down. The ring came like right before the show started. There was a film crew that was, not a crew, but like people were going to film this show. They walked out after an argument before it all started. It was absolutely insane.
Wow.
Welcome to the business, right? It was, but it was a really good introduction for what pro wrestling days could be like. And I got to work with G-Man for the very first time. G-Man is the wide shoulders upon which the British wrestling industry stands upon. He holds a lot of this industry together with his bare hands. I got to call the matches, and it was genuinely, up until that, it was a massive highlight of my life. As nothing but a fan up until that point. Getting to do that was just incredible. Powerbomb through my announce table, the main event, calling it without anything, just really something else. But they used my commentary, but I kind of didn't hear from anybody at Infinite. So it was, they obviously, I don't know, didn't want me back, or weren't thinking that much about commentary, or had someone else in mind. I went to the next show as a fan with my friend Tommy, thinking, he was like, "I'll just come along anyway, and maybe they'll want to use you, or maybe they can use you." And I was like, don't really feel great about that, being booked. And I did. I got to call a couple of matches, but I didn't have anyway. That didn't work out. And then in about 5 years later, I good friends with Chris Brooker from the stand-up comedy world. Chris is an incredible, brilliant comedian, brilliant MC, and he's played, I think, every gig and venue that I ever ran in the Midlands. And he played theatres for me, and he's played dodgy curry house back rooms for me. And so Infinite Promotions was kind of like my first introduction to British indie wrestling. I'd seen some of the more kind of end of the pier style family entertainment stuff that didn't quite get my ECW Nitro heart pounding like I wanted it to, but it was still very entertaining. Kids like it and everything. 51st State of Emergency Promotions was like eye-opening to me. I was like, man, I can't believe what incredible wrestlers there are and shows there are in this country. This was still incredible. It felt like being live at a pay-per-view. There were stories and angles. It was brilliant. And I in those subsequent years, I did start to get into Futureshock Wrestling and went to see them in Manchester several times, sitting in their second and third row and stuff, and seeing fantastic shows. And then in the Midlands as well, Fight Club Pro, I'd started attending their shows and seeing some Chikara shows when they came over. And then, 2016, my dear friend Chris Brooker, who I was aware had sort of taken the reins at Futureshock, asked if I'd want to come down for a tryout. I wasn't just a stand-up comedian at the time. I was also working in local radio as well, having my own show on local radio. So he knew I could talk for an extended period of time and hold a live show together. Like it's a very multifaceted thing. He took a chance on me and opened the door, and I did a show quite late in the year. Called that show alongside Sam Bailey, who was quite a different person at the time, and we actually got on at the time. We went well enough for them, thankfully, to offer me this sort of return spot, regular, ringside host. I think they were. Yeah, I think they were impressed to a certain extent. The commentary is kind of weird. Like, not a lot. You don't always get a lot of feedback. It's generally, it was really good, and then we don't need to say anything to you for like 3 or 4 months or whatever. Yeah, so that was good, and that's been my role ever since.
Good, that's fantastic. It seems like Chris Brooker's played like a part in your life from way before Futureshock as well.
Yeah, we go back in the comedy world. But it's one of those things where, you might not, because you live in very different places, you might not hang out outside of a gig. But it completely changed my life that he not just remembered me as a fan, but knew I could, hold some sort of live show together and deal with a barrel of monkeys exploding everywhere every 2 minutes. And it really, I had a huge amount of regret and kind of disappointment at not being more involved when the Infinite Promotions thing kind of didn't happen and fell apart. It felt it was the best experience. It was one of the best kind of things I'd ever done in my young at that time life. And it felt like I'd been rejected by wrestling, which I loved. I took it quite hard, and I didn't pursue any other opportunities and kind of knock on doors and put my CV out or whatever, because I felt like I'd had a bite of the apple, and the people who knew what they're talking about weren't interested. Again, they used my commentary on some. I think the videos is up on YouTube, but So when Chris kind of gave me this, felt like a second chance. I was older as well. I was a lot more eager, but I was also, I think I had a lot more experience in hosting things and conducting myself. And I came to it very, very quite late. An awful lot of the people I work with now, I could literally, I'm old enough to be their fathers, and it's kind of weird with the 20-year-olds and the 18-year-olds and things. But I'm really pleased I came to it later in life, because I think I appreciate Future Shock and the opportunities a lot more, and I think I have a lot more experience that I could bring to the table than I did if I was doing it in my 20s.
I can see where you're going from. I agree with that, actually, because the older you get, the wiser you get, more educated you get, and your cadence will improve on radio, on commentary with time as well. I want it. So I've done radio. I've done radio for 3 years now myself on Bolton FM, and it gets more over time. It goes from those nerves and butterflies in the stomach, and like, oh, what? How do I do this? Or how do I put this across? To just okay. Now we're in the studio.
I think you're right. I think the major thing in things like hosting a show, like I emceed and hosted my own comedy nights for 17 years, and then the live radio, and then commentary. They all have in common is this thing of almost kind of switching off any barrier between what you think and what you say, because when you think about something, the moment's gone. Or something else. It's just trying to have that. Obviously, not saying any old random nonsense that you think of, like what am I having for tea tonight, but being focused on what's happening and just getting rid of that filter. I mean, that's very much true in stand-up comedy when you're emceeing. You're talking to the audience and just kind of want to fire off them jokes and those insults or whatever you're doing. And I think in local radio, you do very much, obviously you need to have a plan and a focus, but you do want to be talking about the music and the newspapers and what's going on in the office and on your walked in that day. And I think commentary is quite similar. And the more you use that muscle of kind of getting rid of the thinking about it and just kind of almost reacting, but maintaining a focus, I think that's, it does get easier the more you do it.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, I've because I'm the partner. I don't know if you know of Jim Bailey. He's the host. We do the 2-hour sports show.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But there's been moments.
Two-hour show in radio is
It there are times where it can be difficult, and there are times where you sit there and go, "That was 2 hours." You know what I mean? It's just gone. So you just sit down. It's just so much fun. But there have been moments where some of the other people couldn't make it. The host was on holiday or he's ill, and I had to take the reins. So I've done the show pretty much on my own a couple of times, 2, 3, 4 times, something like that. And that's when you really do learn radio. Instead of like having the host to bounce off, you have to bounce off yourself, basically.
Oh, it's all. I always. I never enjoyed. I never really enjoyed doing a radio show on my own, which I did. The vast majority of what I did was that. I mean, I did enjoy bits of it, but it is an awful lot of, especially doing the breakfast show or the drive time show where you're talking 3 or 4 hours. It's just, it's not having them to bounce off. I mean, I don't mind. I actually enjoy it with wrestling commentary. I quite enjoy, especially because some of I don't know if you're aware of some of the people they make me commentate with, but it's Isaiah Quinn and it's Oscar Byron. And, I would rather, I did a full year with Sam Bailey. I would rather call the show on my own than have those kind of commentary partners, really. But wrestling's a weird beast.
Oh God, yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I did enjoy it when I did it on my own. It's more about the responsibility. I enjoy getting that responsibility because it's another step. It's something I hadn't done, like, because they were training. There were points where all of us were in, but I'd be on the board. Just training with the filters and everything like that, just with the faders up and down and how to go into each thing. So we were learning. They had me train just so there's somebody else on the show that knows how to run the board if someone else is ill or can't make it.
Right.
And I enjoyed the responsibility. to be honest. It was fun, and it was usually just the first hour because then someone would come in the second hour and join me, and then I've got someone to bounce off.
Yeah.
I think radio can help a lot with confidence, with how you speak and how you get your thoughts across in pretty much everyday life. It helps with confidence and gets you out of your shell.
I think so many of these pursuits, I think stand-up comedy can be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I think professional wrestling can be the same as well.
Yeah.
Pursuing some of these things can really help change your life, and they certainly have mine. I don't know what kind of person I would have become without comedy, and it's led to so many things that I've been able to go in and do and present myself. I'm not someone that ever needed help with confidence for whatever reason. It's there in abundance. But it certainly taught me a huge amount, especially the DIY spirit of these things is really I talk now to groups of young people who don't quite know what to do with their lives, and I like to champion the creative arts, and I think professional wrestling, British wrestling is one of them, and stand up and writing and filmmaking and all these kinds of things. And I'm a massive proponent of the DIY spirit of some of these things. Where there's virtually no gatekeepers. Futureshock Wrestling started 18 years ago when a bunch of lads had nowhere to train and nowhere to learn and put on shows, and they just did it themselves. They found a place, they came up with a deal, they hired it, they brought in trainers, they brought in Chris Hero and Claudio Coxlaro, and they came in and they put on a show, and they learned how to make a poster and do a press release. And it's exactly the same for me when I started my own comedy club. There was nowhere else to do it. You got to get up, do it yourself. And it's the same for young people who want to get into filmmaking or theatre or writing or singing in a band or whatever. Those things teach you. You can learn so many transferable skills when you start a band and try to get a gig or put on your own gig or find a place to practice and things.
Very, very much agree. Very much agree, because a lot of these things are, all of them actually, are incredibly daunting right at the start, because you don't know what's going on. You say, because say this, for example, YouTubers, a lot of like one YouTuber talking to a camera, that can be very, very difficult. It's like a band in the garage with band practice trying to act as if there's a crowd there. There's always, when you first start off, there's, as you said earlier, there's that barrier of like second guessing yourself, like I'm just talking to a camera, or I'm trying to communicate with a crowd that isn't there, and it's that nerves that just builds and builds. But once you get past that, you're absolutely right, it does teach you a hell of a lot, because you get past that little bit of self-doubt, and then the confidence starts to build after that.
Yeah.
So what, in commentary, what would you say are some little nuances in commentary that you would say kind of help, like you'd look at?
For other commentators?
In general, yeah.
I find some of it difficult. I'm not sure if there's I'm not sure if it's one of those things that can be taught necessarily. I think it could be critiqued, and you can go, oh, perhaps try this and perhaps try that. I find myself, commentary feels very, very easy to me. After 34 years of watching professional wrestling, I think I am fluent in the language of pro wrestling. Not to say that I, have stepped in the ring or trained. I'm fluent in the language that's trying to be communicated to the audience.
Yeah.
Just through watching it for so many years, I know I kind of have a very good understanding of what is trying to be communicated to the audience, and that comes quite naturally to me. I think if I have to boil it down, which I do sometimes to our commentary team, if there's someone new joining the team, which has happened quite a lot, or someone wants a bit of advice here and there, I think the biggest one, really simple, boil it down to, say what you see and then speculate on what you've seen. It's not exactly groundbreaking advice, but if a wrestler has their arm, smashed into a metal ring post, say what you see and then speculate. What does this mean for the rest of this match? What does this mean for the moves in his arsenal? What does this mean for trying to get your shoulder up if you have a damaged arm? What kind of damage could be done? What does it mean for their career? What does it mean for the next match, their championship hopes? What is it? So that, I think, is a pretty basic way of boiling down commentary. Describe what you see, and then speculate from there as the action is flowing. I'm a big proponent of nailing someone's USP, their unique selling point, as they come onto that camera. Like, get both people's USPs over to convey that to the audience. This is why you care about this person, and this is why you care about that person. This is why they're having this match, and then we're off to the races. Wrestling commentary is not rocket science, nor should it be. Yeah, but I mean, every promotion is different. Futureshock Wrestling is it's my favorite. I mean, I've watched an awful lot, but Futureshock will always be the best to me. It's the closest to the great stuff I watched, and almost a mix of the 80s boom and the 90s boom. I think Futureshock is very much more about the people's big characters and the emotion that's going on. And those are big things to kind of focus on in Futureshock, and everywhere's slightly different. Some places are a lot more action orientated, a lot more about the big moves and things. And the Futureshock, I think that's the heart of Futureshock.
Yeah.
Does that answer that question? Is that what you meant by nuances?
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
If someone's, I do that. It's actually, funnily enough, something I was talking to him about last night, because she was talking about, because I've been watching wrestling a lot longer than my mum has, so she'd asked me little questions about certain little details, and she asked me a question of when we watched a tag team match. It was Jenny B and Jack Barron versus Jack Roberts and Helena Razor, and the ring the arm over that and hold it while the tag team partner jumps off and double axe and does it. And she was asking about it. I was like, well, it's not supposed to be like end of the match, broken arm stuff. They're just wearing it down to get it to tailor that story. Like they are working on the arm. They want the arm worked on. They want to hurt the arm, so then it hinders what they're going to do throughout the match.
Is a great way of physically dissecting someone and taking away, something they can use to their advantage. It's a great way if you take away someone's arm, are they going to be able to do a suplex? Are they going to be able to do a DDT, pick you up? Are they going to be able to make an effective cover, get on a submission hold? It's a very important thing to do. Yeah,
and it's storytelling 101, because it's the one thing I love about, the main thing I love about wrestling is there are infinite different ways you can tell a story. There are so many different ways you can tell a story in that ring, and it throughout a show, you can go from watching Jenny B go absolutely mental and not shut up and be one of the most hilarious people you possibly ever meet, to Rabbit making a kid cry. Because it's Rabbit. It's polar opposites, but it's wrestling. It's still an amazing story.
Well, I think wrestling still at its heart is the circus, it's the carnival, and the circus has got the clowns, but it's also got the high wire act, and it's also got the lion tamer, and it's got you need these different elements to try and entertain as broad a section of the audience as possible.
Exactly, yeah. If it was the same match throughout with no build, it'd be okay. The wrestling might be good, but you might not capture the hearts of the people in the attendance.
Yeah, and I think in some not that I'll name because it's personal taste, but there are some shows, some promotions I used to go to quite regularly, and towards the end, it just felt like, I was getting the same kind of thing every multiple times in a show and multiple shows, and there's only so many times you can be wowed by that thing that the top rope Canadian destroyer. There's only so many times you can kind of be taken aback by those kind of that kind of action. So yeah, I think a variety is always good.
100% agree. 100% agree. Yeah, that's that's a little tiny gripe with me, actually. The Canadian destroyer, I think it's something that's, to my personal opinion anyway, something that is used a lot nowadays. If it was used sparingly, it would have more of an effect, but then you can have shows where there are about 3-4 in one show where it's like, I've seen it once, it's kind of like decreasing in value each time you see it.
Yeah, but 50 years ago there was someone saying the same thing about the suplex. There was some old timer going, "Oh, these kids today, marking my day, the suplex ended it, and you'd only see a suplex once every 2 years." That's all. We're all just. It's just how us getting older, and the language of pro wrestling changing, and the audience is changing along with it. And then there's me and you stuck in the mud, going, "Back in my day."
I'm getting to that point, aren't I?
Well, there's a start. Like guys have been sharing every time there's some new criticism about the way wrestling is today. Someone will bring up, like, Lou Thez. Is it Lou? It's somebody criticizing Harley Race for being a stunt wrestler, for because he uses the suplex and he uses the this, that, and the other, and too many throws, and like Harley Race being seen as like, oh, he's just so showy and so over the top, and that's honestly, there's no difference between that and what a lot of people do today. It just shows that you perhaps haven't changed as much along with the times as you need to.
Fair enough. Like, that just reminds me of Osprey and Ricochet. You just get Cornette calling the spot monkeys. And then decades ago, that's Harley Race. How times change.
I think that's the first time it came up, actually. People sharing this kind of criticism of race, yeah. And of course, there's the problem when we think about wrestling is that we have a tendency to think of it as a monolith, as this is British wrestling or this is pro wrestling. And of course, it's not. TNT is very different to Futureshock, which is different to Progress, which is different to, Odyssey, which is different to, like, they all have their own individual they're almost different genres within an industry and within kind of a medium.
Yeah, you get a different feel, and I think that is something people who don't necessarily watch wrestling, because if you don't watch wrestling, you have no idea. Like it, and it's like music. If I don't listen to this person, I have no idea. I've never heard them before. They might be good, might not, but I think that's one thing people don't really seem to understand when they don't watch the product, is that you get a different feel with different shows you go to. Like, I went to IWF, and then shortly after, I went to Bolton Town Wrestling on Saturday. Friday, just gone out of the time of recording. And both completely different feels, completely different feels, but it's still enjoyable. It's not, people need to find what they enjoy, and that's, in wrestling, there's a plethora of different styles that you can enjoy and different shows that you can enjoy, and it's one of the biggest and one of the best things I personally feel about wrestling is there's a plethora of different styles for you to dive into.
I agree. Yeah, same as same as there is, you might say I like science fiction, but I don't like all science fiction. I don't like that type or this type, or I like crime. I like crime fiction, but I don't like all that kind of crime fiction. I like this kind of crime fiction. It's kind of genres and styles within a medium, I think.
Yes, exactly. Within the wrestling world, would you say, and I'm not just going to like relative it down to one, because I think that'd be quite harsh, given the amount of wrestlers there are at the moment. It's amazing. But which wrestlers are there some wrestlers which you would say at the moment you enjoy calling their work, you enjoy watching them, both as a commentator and a fan?
Tonga. I think she's just fantastic. I think she is, having. I think I've called some of the earliest matches right the way through to now. She's just really puts on brilliant matches, brilliant show. She is incredibly. I think she's everything we want our champion to be in Futureshock Wrestling. I think she's a great kind of standard bearer for the company at the moment, especially when the men's division is Damon Lee, who doesn't seem to really care about Futureshock or has a different opinion on the fans and all of that kind of whatever's going on with Damon Lee. We've got Tonga as the real kind of face of the company. I think she's just got. I'm actually kind of used to saying things like, "Oh, Tonga's got such a big future in British wrestling." She does, but she's kind of almost there right now. She really is realizing so much of it. So yeah, I'm like a fully signed up member of the Tonga fan club.
Yeah.
We're really spoiled in Futureshock to have the incredible, whatever I might think of their current kind of behaviors and how they carry themselves, but the pedigree of people like Joey Hayes, Danny Hope, Damon Lee, and regrettably Sam Bailey, like the pedigree of those kind of people, is some, and then as well to have Tonga and Synergy, and to have those kind of wrestlers as well, Dynamite Lee. That's just a really what a deep roster. And then there's other things like he's not someone I wouldn't want to be. 2-Bit is not somebody that I would want to be left alone walking through a car park at the end of the show with. But like the way he's so ferocious that ring, he is so it is so unique. I can't recall another wrestler I've seen in the last 10 years who moves and wrestles like 2-Bit. So he is always something. I think Synergy are the most exciting tag team in this country. I can't get over how excited I am when those matches are. And then there's someone, another person I don't like him. He doesn't like me or anybody else. But JJ Webb, who I'm not sure I have a lot of respect for, creates incredibly entertaining television.
Yes.
Whether it's controversy or whatever else, as someone that is on the production side and is there, working with all these other incredible people to make a television program, I have to say JJ Webb creates incredibly compelling, exciting television, whether we dislike what's going on or not. So that's, I'm a very Futureshock guy, but I think those are all just incredible kind of people to watch and keep an eye on, and they'll soon be everywhere. You soon won't be able to ignore them.
I was there right at the beginning with Tonga, as you were yourself, and dear oh my, like the progression, the improvement, the sheerly just how good she is. She commands the ring without even having to make an effort.
Absolutely, yeah, great, and it's something that I've seen over the years with Alexis Falcon,
yes,
with for better or worse with JJ Webb. I've been around. It doesn't take too long to be in a wrestling company before you see these different kind of classes come up through the rosters, through the ranks, and not everybody makes it. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
But the ones that manage to do, the young guns, for example, who can go on to bigger and brighter things, and the where they start at, and you can see them shoot up and grab everyone's attention. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's sickening how young they are.
You know what? I'm going to put on record that I came up with the name Young Guns. Occasionally, Chris Brooker likes to take credit for that, but absolutely, I wrote it down. I know I can tell you exactly where I got it from and exactly why I used it. The lads themselves thought it was some kind of mix of motor-city machine guns and the Young Bucks, and that's not accurate. In baseball, they use the term Young Guns for the new young stars coming up, and they also, the first time I heard it was they do it in comic books as well. When I was a teenager in the 90s, it was applied to, like, there was a Young Guns program which was talking about the hottest new artists coming up in the comic book world. And as someone that's always been creatively minded, I thought Young Guns is such a good name for something.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had it with me. And I started to slip it in to commentary because I knew we were having these two incredible, youngsters together. And I started saying, "Oh, they're the Young Guns of Futureshock Wrestling. They're the Young Guns of," and I kept doing it. And then I one day said to Chris, "I'm just going to start calling them the Young Guns. Is that cool? Busy day? Yeah, do what you need to." And I like to say it doesn't irk me, but I've seen Chris Brooker take credit for it a couple of times, and I need to get on record that it was me.
There we go.
And it's a good name, isn't it? It's a good name.
It's a very good name. It suits them perfectly. Chris, stop it.
I'll be hearing from my solicitor. Yeah.
That'll be get my lawyer on you. No, they are. It is absolutely ridiculous how young they are, how young Ethan Allen is, and just how how good they are. They are. You look at those two.
I don't even think of Ethan Allen as young anymore. Like because he's such an old soul.
He is.
But like I saw him at a show a couple of months ago. It's been a while since I've seen him, and it was just he doesn't come. Not that I think he's an old fogey or anything, and Luke as well. They don't come across as young because when I first kind of was working with them, they were helping out timekeeping and ring crew and stuff, and they were really young then. I don't see them as young anymore. They're ass kicking blokes now. That's how I view them. They've got big bright futures.
You could pick them up, both of them. You could pick them up and put them anywhere, and the fans will just gravitate to them because that's who they are. It's how they are.
I've never seen. I don't think I've seen anyone really they got that. Projecting intensity is one of the hardest things to do in wrestling, and they nailed it from almost the start. And I don't know if that's something you can teach. I think that has to be a little bit of magic that's in you. I think a huge amount of other stuff that you do need to teach and all that. But I think they've just really, especially Ethan, he just was able to make a crowd go crazy when he screams at them and everything. It's fantastic.
It's presence. I agree. I don't think presence really can be taught. I think it's something it's something that comes. Either you've got it straight away, or you don't. With experience, it'll come, and with experience.
I think it's very peculiar to have it immediately. I think that's it doesn't. I think that's like it stands out when you put it immediately. I think it naturally comes with time. I think.
Yeah.
And it's very different. Like Sting has got presence and always has, and so does Session Moth Martina, right? And these are you couldn't get like Crow Sting and the Session Moth. You couldn't get. It's a dream match for me, but you couldn't get much further apart, and yet the presence is very strong whenever you're watching them, perform.
Massively. And you mentioned Two-Bit as well. Like if you want presence, that man he's a predator. He's an absolute predator. He's ferocious, and Yeah, as you said about Two-Bit, I've never seen anybody like him. I've
No,
never
me
seen
neither.
anybody depict and be so laser focused on a body part, and so laser focus is so ferocious that when you're in there, when you're looking at him, you forget he's human and you genuinely think he is a legitimate predator.
He's a nasty piece of work, yeah, and it's
Mm.
just it's impossible to get away from that.
Massively, yeah. Massively. It's one of the one of my favorites to watch in the ring, I think, because you sat there and you're so taken in by everything Tuba is doing. But you're also thinking that he's so ferocious, he's so laser focused, and you're marveling in your head how you go from like the person that comes through the ropes to this just terrifying person.
Mm.
Like a switch like that, and it's just boom, like whoever he's in there with, like they've got no ankle left, basically. They're done.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunned. I remember seeing him do a promo at Chris Booker's promo class. It was the first one out of all of us. And we were just sat there like, okay. How am I meant to follow that one? Cheers. He was the very first one. He just has that intensity.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's incredible. I think Tuba is phenomenal, and I think he's another one, as well as Tonga, Falcon, Dynamite Lee, all these people. Its presence, and you could just drop them in any show, wherever. It doesn't matter, and they'll adapt to the feel of the show, and
I think
still work perfectly.
I think Tony Wright is another one that everybody's talking about.
Oh yes,
right now, and is someone that is a joy. I mean, I'm a little biased because again, Tony's a friend from the stand-up world, but or his previous profession. Now he's a podcaster and professional wrestler. But yeah, he is someone who has presence, and he is someone that projects that massively to the audience.
Yeah.
And makes those connections. And in everywhere he's been, he seems to make this amazing connection with the audience.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably his experience in front of a crowd, which, how many people wrestling there the first dozen matches have got that level of experience in front of an audience, and that level of experience commanding an audience and reacting to an audience. Yeah, and he's somebody I think is going to have a really special future in British wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Massively agree. Massively agree. I think a lot of it is so. I think 100% of that with Tony Wright is organic, because he was a backstage interviewer and announcer. He's worked in and around the business for so long before becoming a professional wrestler. When he stepped in between the ring, that reaction was organic because we knew his story, we knew who he was, and it was just so fresh for everyone to see. And we know who he is as well.
He's you never hear this adjective used to describe people in wrestling. He is one of the most charming individuals you'll ever meet. I don't know anyone that has a bad word to say against him, but sometimes that's just being a nice person. Lots of people are nice people, but his company is genuinely like, you enjoy his company so much, and he's charming. And I think he charms locker rooms, and I think he's able to charm audiences as well, which is not something you see a lot of in wrestling. That wrestler, he's so charming. We all love him. It's going to be interesting to see him as he gets, he had that brutal encounter with Big T, who is someone else. Is just, I mean, Big T is just an absolute spectacle to watch in that ring. Incredible.
He had a match, the main event at Bolton Town Wrestling, against Rarebit for the title. It's the best Big T match and best Rarebit match I've ever seen. It was phenomenal. Two big horses just absolutely going hell for leather, and it was absolutely beautiful to watch. And when it gets released, when the video does get released out on air, I recommend everybody to watch it. Because,
really, I'm not surprised. Yeah, Big T is something beautiful. Else, and it's interesting seeing Tony get into these as the charming man of British wrestling it's interesting to see him get into these personal situations, these very intense situations. That's not something really that I associate with my old friend Tony.
Yeah.
So seeing that happen is really, really more interesting. And you see, I think I'm seeing more levels and more depth to something that I've known for a while now, and that's really interesting when you see him, have to really dig deep and fight hard and sweat and bleed and all of that. Yeah. That's something I want to see a lot more of from Tony. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. It's always amazing when you see that different side to a wrestler you never thought you'd see, that you never thought was there. So it opens up a completely different chapter and completely different style of that person. You see more of an insight to the person as well.
The anniversary show, the Futureshock had, Tonga, Gia Adams in a last woman standing match in a main event. I mean, a different side of both women, I think, but I think we perhaps associate ferocity with Gia Adams a lot more, and seeing that from Tonga was really just something very, very special. One of the best main events. I think that you can put that main event on top of any card, and everyone will go home happy.
I'll have to watch on demand for that one, because this year has been so just bad for a plethora of reasons, but a lot of it is money. I'm on nail pay at the moment, hopefully going back to work very soon. So we've had to pick and choose where we can go, wrestling shows. And unfortunately, we couldn't make it to that show. And I was gutted. I was genuinely gutted.
It's tough. Yeah, I hear you. But like you said, £4 on demand, you can't beat it. You get access to everything.
Exactly.
I'm just going to quick plug futureshockinfinite.com. £4 to watch. £4 a month. You get to see everything, including all the great synergy matches, all the great Tonga matches, all the great Dynamite Lee, everything we've been talking about. These guys, they're on futureshockinfinite.com. Sorry, there's my plug.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, absolutely happy to plug Futureshock. Yeah, absolutely happy to. I try and do it as much as I can myself. It's the first indie show I ever watched, and it's just
what show? Can you remember what the show was?
It was that 53-2. A few people.
Oh yeah.
In 2017. Few people I don't want to mention.
Sure.
And I had Pete Dunne in it.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Lana Austin beat. I don't think she's wrestling anymore.
April Davids in the main event.
Davids for the women's title.
Was it 2 out of 3? No, it wasn't 2 out of 3 falls, but it was a big stip main event.
I think so. Yeah.
It was incredible. Both women were both women in half the locker room were in tears at the end of that match.
It's phenomenal.
It was one of the best matches I've called. That was a really unique venue, 53-2.
Very small, tight packed, but you felt personal because it feels closer to the action as well.
Yeah,
I actually quite like that.
Thankfully, Futureshock is back in Manchester City Centre at New Century Hall now, which is, I don't know when this is going out, but we're just doing it now, October, start of October. We're there, and fingers crossed that's a relationship that will carry on going forward, because it's great being in the city centre. It's great. It's great being in Stockport, our home, of course, but it's also great to kind of move out a little bit and do some kind of have a different vibe, a different energy to the show, like you can get in the city centre.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's Futureshock. I'm absolutely positive it'll be another phenomenal show. So that's just the bar that's set for these shows. Personally,
I'm aware of a couple of matches, and it's going to be very good.
I can't argue. I just expect that it's Futureshock for me is special. It's special.
Oh yeah, agreed. Big time.
For me, with my personal favorites is Futureshock and WF. For me personally, BTW I've only been to a couple of shows of BTW because my mum works Fridays, and I know I live in Wigan, but it is still, when you get to the station, a bit difficult to get to the BTW venue.
Sure.
So it can be difficult getting there. But when we do, we leave happy. We leave happy. BTW is fantastic. But like Futureshock and IWF are my two. I love. I absolutely love. You always leave happy.
It's something really special, isn't it? Because it's so different. Going to live shows, man, it's so different to going to the movies, to going to a concert. It's so different to anything else there is to enjoy. Going to the theatre, I can't think if there's nothing that provokes, I think, that level of emotional reaction consistently, that puts you on a big emotional roller coaster that can give you goosebumps and can make you go, ah, and can get you excited and can get you, I don't think there's anything else, no other live or recorded form of entertainment that can do that, man.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And none of those other shows you can heckle the likes of JJ Webb or Jenny B and get the reactions from them. And sometimes I wonder how I haven't crossed any form of line with them. I don't know. It's quite a loud chanter.
Yeah.
They are phenomenal. And the better they are, the louder you get, and the more you heckle and chant. And you get Lorna Austin in there as well, who I was talking to him on the other day. I was legitimately saying Lorna Austin is the flagpole standard bearer for all of British wrestling, in my opinion. I think she's one of the best.
And I think
right now,
100%, and she has been for quite a while. And I think the problem now with Lorna Austin is that now she's starting to, like, now she kind of knows how good she is, and so now we're starting to see this horrible other side of her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she has been. That's why she's worked everywhere. Everybody opens their doors because everybody wants Lorna Austin on the show. And I think, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, I don't know what's gone on with her, but she's now, believes the hype about herself, and it's. I'm surprised she can get through doors with that head of hers now, but it hasn't diminished her ability in the ring. That's the really frustrating thing to sit back and watch. You want somebody like that to have a spectacular fall, but unfortunately she just seems to be too good in that ring, and it's grating. And I have to kind of stamp all that down as a commentator. It's kind of hard to try and be impartial, but yeah, Lana's one of the best ever.
It's same as a fan, really. You want to boo her, you want to sit there and boo her, but
I'm not allowed to do. I'm not allowed to do that.
Good.
And they've told me I can't stand up in the middle of a show and go boo. But I very much want to a lot of the time.
We'll do it for you. It's all right.
Yeah, that's what we need.
It's difficult though. Like, you sat there like, I want to boo this person. I don't like what they stand for. I don't like what they're doing. But at the same time, I sat there going, how? You're too good. She's so fluid in every little tiny little movement. So fluid, so good. Everything's just natural. You can't boo her. You want to, you do boo her, but in the back of your mind, you go, she's amazing.
Don't reward bad behavior. That's what I think. It's a lot like you just have to let them know that you're not on board with it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Now, as I said in the intro to our podcast, you wear so many hats, and well, with the sun being on recently, that's actually not a bad thing. You have written for Mock the Week, Comedy Central, The Apprentice, and
the Apprentice, you're fired, not The Apprentice. Like the spin-off show.
Fired.
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. Sorry.
I would love the job of writing the terrible jokes that Alan Sugar makes, because they're horrifying. But no, there's a spin-off show where they get a comedian in, and the comedian kind of makes fun of the episode that's just aired. And yeah, I've contributed to some stuff for that. Yeah,
fantastic stuff. What would you say the process is for writing for these the TV shows?
Well, they're all quite different, really. Like Mock the Week's a very, very intense situation. I mean, I've written for comedians that have been on Mock the Week, and you have a very tight deadline to write very specific jokes about very dull news stories. It's one of the hardest. It's ending, coming to an end now. It's one of the hardest challenges, I think, in comedy, to try and find ways to make fun of intensely dull things that might be happening. And there are the funny ones where something ludicrous happens, but there's also an awful lot, because there's an awful lot recorded that is never broadcast. So you're doing an awful lot of writing, and it's a very tight turnaround. You don't have, more than a handful of days, a couple of days to get everything and to think things through and to perfect and to. So that's a very intense process. Comedy Central, I got to write and contribute for a roast battle between two comedians. That's really weird because you're writing mean insults about someone that you may or may not know. I think it'd be better if it was it's a comedian. I think I've met the comedian once. I can't remember, but it was you get a little profile of their life and the things that they've said it's okay to joke about. And then you write very intense, dark insults and jokes and stuff. And that was different in a weird way. I had feedback when I first submitted for that. I had feedback from the team that was, you need to go harder. I'd been, because it's just not over that. I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I have gone a bit too easy on them maybe. The Apprentice was The Apprentice, You're Fired, I found almost like live tweeting something. If you're going to live tweet and make jokes about something, it was a bit similar to that. The most I think the most challenging, I was commissioned to write a pilot for Comedy Central, for a production company was working with Comedy Central looking for a topical news show that was a little bit like the John Oliver show they have in America on HBO. And that was a big process. That was a long process, and that was an involved thing. And went, go down to the filming it in London and all that kind of business. And that was kind of, and fixing things on the day I was there for that. No, it should be less this and more that. And I don't think he should. That was a highlight, but it was also a very tough, demanding job. So yeah, all the processes are kind of different.
That very, very interesting. Very interesting. I can imagine it being extremely difficult for you to go hard on someone you don't necessarily know personally. You've just got a list. This is what you can rip me about.
Thankfully, my involvement is often hidden, so nothing was going to come back on me. So I just definitely needed somebody to say, come on, if it's not broadcastable, it's not going to be broadcast. So just go as mean as possible and see what flies, see what they reject and what they pick out, so yeah, but it's something else, I tell you. It's something else. Yeah.
I can imagine would the comedians get to see the jokes before they get picked out for broadcasting or not?
I wasn't. I'm not on that end side of the project. I'm not sure. Everything's going to have been okayed. Yeah, I'd imagine so. Is everything is okay? Nothing's being broadcast that day. Yeah. I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% on that. I'm not 100% on that. But there's an awful lot of, standards and practices, and what can be said and what can't be said, and what's legally fine and what's okay, and what have they. I think it's more a process of agreed beforehand. I'm okay with you saying anything about these subjects, and then I imagine there's a process of do not ever mention these. So I think it's probably more that than it is they know what's about to be said, because the reactions I think are very genuine, and yes. I've seen an awful lot of people, stand-ups that I know and I'm friends with on the show, and they all feel like genuine reactions. So I think it probably is a surprise what is said. Yeah.
Fair enough. It is interesting though. It is very, very interesting because I don't know if I'll be able to do that. I don't know if I don't know if I'd be able to sit and be like, oh well, I can tell this absolutely brutal joke about someone I've never met, and it's just at some point it's like a little thing you had like, because with your best mates or with your friends, it's no horse barred.
It's just applying. I think this is where the problem comes sometimes with the general public who perhaps aren't very comedy savvy, taking issue with jokes.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we want to have a world where everyone feels happy and safe and not persecuted. But comedians don't have any attachment to the jokes they tell. Jokes don't mean anything to a comedian at all. They don't. It's not an opinion ever. Like sometimes a joke might be based on an opinion, maybe, and so I think that's it. There's a massive detachment between a comedian and the thing they're saying and writing. It doesn't feel like a criticism or an attack or anything like that. And very often receiving the jokes doesn't kind of feel, the same way. So I can see, I think I can. My reticence in writing was more to do with what can I get past the censors? They're not going to go for this, not going to go for that. That's what it was mainly. But yeah, comedians there's nothing of jokes don't mean anything to a comedian.
So it's more about taking the person out of the equation, just seeing how hard you can go.
Yeah, they're just a topic. It's a topic like anything else.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because I love comedy. I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't love a good comedy, a good laugh, and so I'm a massive Ricky Gervais fan, and I'm not sure if you are or not, but I love just the fact that he doesn't hold back. Like he's a genuinely great person in real life. Has a plethora of charities and everything, but he doesn't hold back with comedy. And I love that kind of comedy. I love George Carlin for that single thing as well. I think George Carlin was fantastic. So I think the less you hold back, the better.
I think it depends. I'm not a massive Gervais fan. I think an awful lot of George Carlin stuff was brilliant. Yeah, I think it's case by case, isn't it? Everyone's different, and I'd say get out there and see some live shows, man, because you never know when you're going to see the next George Carlin on a comedy night.
I'd absolutely love to. I need to keep my finger on the pulse a bit. I seem to miss a lot of things like this. Like I think my brother went to one of them. My brother went to one of the shows and he said it was like actually really fun. So I can imagine it being like quite similar to wrestling in terms of you're going there live, watching it live right in front of you. It could be a completely different feel to watching like beyond the TV screen.
Absolutely. Like, so in the same way that if you go and see a wrestling show and you don't know half the acts or most of the acts on a wrestling show, you kind of know you're going to have a good time anyway. Comedy can be the same. You might not have, you're probably not going to have heard of any of the comedians, but they're all like the top of their field who make a living doing it. You know, when you go into the comedy clubs and things like that, smaller shows can be a bit different, but you're still going to see a good show, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, I've watched the Evans twice live, and that's like sold out big Emmy arenas, things like that. I would actually really like to go to the comedy clubs.
It's much funnier in a comedy club. Like I've been to
imagine.
I've been to a couple of stadiums. Once 102 gig, and it just isn't. There's no atmosphere really. Whereas when you're in the Glee Club or the Comedy Store, you're packed in there, low ceiling, laughs bouncing everywhere. It's dark.
Yeah,
it's great. Everything's funnier in that room.
I can imagine that. Different atmosphere, isn't it? And
closer
feel. Yeah, I can imagine that sort of stuff. Yeah, because it's one of the things I actually really like about indie wrestling is because it's more close knit. You feel closer to them. You feel more like a family, and I can imagine that translating very well. As you said earlier, there is a crossover between comedy and wrestling because they're both performances, aren't they?
They travel up and down the country and they work different things, different nights, and sometimes you see people and sometimes you don't. And You're your own self-promoter and marketer, and it's huge crossovers between them. Yeah.
I'd love to go down. I need to keep my finger on the pulse. Keep my eye open for some, but I definitely enjoy going down to some of the comedy nights.
It's great. I mean, there's some people make the transition really well. Chris Brooker's obviously made this transition to working in British wrestling. Tony Wright has as well. I heard a horrible story that Danny Proper had done some stand-up gigs in the past. So obviously, there's sometimes that it doesn't know it's not always going to translate, is it? Sometimes I think probably if you're a bad stand-up, you're probably, are you going to be a great wrestler? It's kind of hard to, sometimes. But there's a Tony Wright and a Danny Proper, probably two ends of the spectrum, I imagine, from comedy to wrestling.
He's an interesting fellow, Mr. Danny Proper.
It's one word for him, yeah.
You never really know what to say about Danny Proper, but he's interesting.
Best mates with JJ Webb. I think that speaks quite volumes of someone, doesn't it? Really.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's I read that you also do one-to-one workshops with comedians as well. Like what's that like?
Yeah.
What's it like? It's like working from. I can imagine each comedian is different with different styles and different like cadence and approach.
Yeah, so I'm not really focused much on like performance. My kind of job these days is material writing, and kind of bringing that experience to it. And everything's different, man. Some comedians want to kind of give their set, their routine like an MOT, and so we'll pull everything apart, put it back together. What words don't we need? What words are important? I might approach a subject in a different way. Go, if it was my joke, I'd be saying it like this, and I'd be perhaps putting that in there. We look at all sorts of different ways of the joke could go and things like that. Sometimes it is a comedian's got like a whole bunch of ideas they've had and not written any jokes or material about it yet. So we'll kind of spitball the ideas, and we'll kind of just develop an idea into a series of jokes. Everything's different. I've worked on people's Edinburgh shows, sit down with them. They'll go through an hour show with me, and it's okay. This isn't working. And we try and fix things. I worked with a great comedian on their national tour. I did about 5 or 6 months, a couple times a month, working on. This is a comedian. This guy's been a professional comedian for 15 years. He doesn't really need me to help him kind of come up with different jokes and things, but he was actually, I want your help exploring big, serious topics and ideas, family, being a dad, child, all that kind of stuff. And how can we kind of make this funny? How can we find some jokes in it? So it just, sometimes it's creative consultation, and sometimes it's very specifically getting into the minutiae of wording and stuff. But I love it. Like when I was a kid, I loved professional wrestling. I loved stand-up. I love comedy in general. It was a while before I got to start. I was getting into stand-up, but I loved Blackadder and Red Dwarf and stuff, and I liked, I like Lee Evans and Eddie Izzard and all that kind of stuff. And I also loved comic books. And then now, as an adult, I work in British wrestling. I write jokes for a living, and I have Marvel podcasts, and that's how I spend all my week. It's how I make all my money, and it's just they're all passion projects.
Yeah,
never going to be rich off any of them, but it's a hell of a way to kind of spend your time and build a life.
Define rich. You know what I mean?
Rich. Once these bills kick in, I'll tell you. Being able to pay your fuel bill, that's rich, man.
Very true.
Yeah. But it's just, and it's things that I remember doing the first Futureshock show. I did remote commentary because it was trying to keep the show as safe as possible with as few people as possible once the world had opened up a little bit with the rules. So, commentary can be done remotely, not ideal, but it can be done. And I hadn't done it in however long, like with the lockdown. And I remember that being, even though I was locked in this room, hot and stuffy and on my own and everything, it was me and a wrestling show for 2.5, 3 hours, thinking about nothing but the show and the amazing wrestlers and what was going on. And I loved it. And I sometimes do this. I'll message someone at the top of the company and say, "Don't ever let me forget how much I love doing this." And then the first show back was incredible as well. So it was these things that can like when sometimes you'll take them for granted because it's part of what you do. Comedy, there was very little. I helped out and developed material for Mock the Week during the pandemic, and I helped out and developed some stuff for Radio 4 as well. Oh. But there wasn't a huge amount. I finished writing a screenplay as a pilot script, but there wasn't a huge amount of comedy to be worked on. So an awful lot was taken away. So I think I'm even more kind of like enthusiastic about them now that they're kind of all back. Yeah. I created my podcast simply because during the pandemic I had nothing else to do. I was like, right, let's talk about Marvel comics for every week and see what we can do something with this. And thankfully that's gone on to be a bit of a success.
Yeah, it was shortly before the pandemic where I started mine. It was 2019. I got fired from a job. I had nothing to do.
Yeah.
So
one of those DIY, baby. That punk spirit. What can we do? Make something happen.
Yeah, exactly. My mum was working. My brother was at home at the time during the pandemic. He was working. So I'm just sat here like, okay, I'm sat at home doing nothing, fired. I don't want to just be sat here while they're all working. I want to do something.
Yeah.
So I studied. I got 3 certificates up there for counselling and CBT. And I started my podcast. And I often look back at my first 5. And dear me, I had Ethan Adam, Big Joe, Isaiah Quinn, Leon Gray, Molly Spartan. That's my first episode. So these are massive names.
How was it talking to Molly Spartan? Because good Lord, she is someone who just never gave me peace. Never gave me peace when she was on a show. No. It was just, she'd come over and abuse me on commentary and she'd yell at me. And she still keeps it up on social media as well. She's something else. It's amazing to look back on the passion projects, but again, teaching you learn through doing. You're picking up transferable skills in one way or another.
Yeah, I can imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course. But I can imagine. Comedy and getting your comedy across could be something very similar to cut to the promo in a match in wrestling as well. In terms of getting that cadence across, it's just possibly different subject matter and a different approach.
Maybe I don't know. Comedy jokes tend to be quite meticulously written, and I'm not sure. I know some promos are, but I think promos tend to be a bit more about maybe emotion and energy and kind of speaking off the cuff, as it were. Whereas with comedy, with a joke, you need to convey a certain idea and quite brevity of language. And I'm not. The perfect person for you to discuss that with, Chris Brooker, because he is the king of the promo classes. He's gone over and random in Florida at the Performance Center and stuff, and he's been a stand-up for so long with such great kind of such great comedy schmucks. I've never sat in on the promo class of his, so I don't quite know. I mean, so much of the wrestling world is so much of a mystery to me still, which I think is a benefit to my position.
I agree. Yeah,
and there's some. I think there are, again, transferable skills. I think I think you're right in that aspect. Yeah, if you were able to deliver kind of jokes in a convincing way, I think you're probably going to be very good at kind of letting the audience know what you want to say about somebody and letting somebody know what you think about them.
Yeah, because in professional wrestling, my favorite thing is the promo. Of course, everybody loves the wrestling. Obviously, you wouldn't pay for a ticket if you didn't love the wrestling. It's just simply beautiful, a story told in the middle of that ring. However, I love promos. I think promos are so integral, so important, potentially, possibly more important than the action, because they can build up to something at a pay-per-view that without the promos wouldn't ever be anywhere near as intense as it possibly would be. I've always, like, since a child, always loved the promo side and the creativity of it all, and watching all these great wrestlers like Edge cutting promos and all these amazing wrestlers, your Punks and all them, Samoa Joe, Paul Heyman, just flawless. And I've always loved that side, like the creative promo side to a wrestling match, to a wrestling show.
I think it's because we love characters, and a huge amount of what a promo is able to do is to accentuate and just really let you know who these big personalities are.
Yeah.
You can look back at some of the great Ric Flair promos on the 6:05 time slot. They're not necessarily selling a match. Sometimes it's just bragging about the last thing he did, but that's selling us, his big personality and his big character, which means we care so much more about what happens in the next match, which is normally we care because we want to see someone punch his lights out and not the smirk off his face. But yeah, I think it's because audiences love big characters and love big personalities, and you get to see a lot more of that in a promo, don't you?
Yeah, you do. I mean, if you want to look more locally, you've got the likes of Tonga, JJ Webb, Molly Spartan, Jenny B, and you've got these larger than life characters who can cut a phenomenal promo, and it intrigues you. And as you said, like, if you are intrigued with that character and that person, and you either want them to get the lights beaten out of them, or you want them to be a hero and overcome, it will then make you care what they then do next.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's lovely. That is. People are probably bored of me saying this on a podcast, but I say it in almost every single one. But it's an escape. It is an escape from whatever mundane thing you're doing, whatever thing you do at work, anything you do at home, no matter what, for 2 to 4 hours or however long it is. You're at a wrestling show watching people beat 10 bars out of each other. It's great.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Is there anything you would like to plug? Any future shows? Anything in the future you'd like to plug?
Head to Futureshock Wrestling .co.uk, I think. Just Futureshock Wrestling. There's some, we're in Stockport with fantastic shows in our kind of home promotion all the time. We've got a new venue in the city centre, New Century Hall, which is going to be really, really fun and exciting. And FutureShockInfinite.com is where you can see all the amazing shows and matches been put together. If you want to hear me talk about comic books, Marvel movies, Marvel comics endlessly, head for Marvel versus Marvel, are available everywhere. Versus the full word, VERSUS. And we put out tons and tons of content all about the history and the trivia of Marvel comics going back to the 1960s and even further behind that, to kind of give you the context behind the MCU and the X-Men movies and the Spider-Man movies and things like that. So we've been putting those out for 2 years now and having a great time doing it. Marvel versus Marvel, get us everywhere.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you too. See you next time.